doing 2 book reviews. The first being on Allegiant by Veronica Roth, the third and sort of final book in the Divergent series, and the other book is 4 by Veronica Roth, and this is a few novellas told by the perspective of 4. So I recently reread Insurgent, which is just up here, and I thought it was about time that I got around to reading Allegiant, just to finish the series off and put that trilogy behind me. So first I'll just say a little bit about Insurgent, seeing as I reread it for the second time. I actually wasn't as thrilled reading it the second time around. I felt like you were just constantly waiting for something to happen, and it just lacked everything that the first book had for me. But I find that happens with me a lot with trilogies, especially like the Match trilogy. I really like the first book. It sets the new world up for you, and then I just find the other books don't live up to it. I felt that Insurgent just didn't have the same impact. I don't know whether that's because I was rereading it, so I already knew what was going to happen. So obviously there's going to be spoilers in this, so if you haven't read either Insurgent, Allegiant, 4 and Divergent, I probably would say don't watch this video, because there will be spoilers. Yeah, just putting it out there. So, in Insurgent, it just, like, Triss's character also really just started to annoy me, how careless she was. And I feel that from Insurgent to Allegiant, her character really changed. I feel like in Allegiant, decisions she was making were the right ones, whereas in Insurgent she was just a bit careless and just went in there without thinking about the consequences. I felt like in Insurgent she almost thought that she was invincible, and that because she was divergent that made her special from everyone else, which it does to some extent. As her character, she just annoyed me in that book. One other thing I want to say about Insurgent, you don't realise until you read that book how like much older they casted in the film. Like, Triss is only 16 and 4 is only supposed to be 18, and in the film they just seem a lot older than they should be. It's not a big deal, but it was just something interesting that I picked up through that book. So the different thing about Allegiant is it's told not only from Triss's point of view but also from 4's point of view, and at the start I found that a bit confusing sometimes, because I would just automatically think I was thinking from Triss's perspective. But as the book went on, obviously, it became easier to read, and this is quite a big spoiler. I can see now, after reading right to the end, I can see why they put in for Tobias's perspective, because at the end when Triss dies, you still want to know what's going on. So because you have Tobias's perspective, you can see what happens after Triss dies, and whether the city sort of patches itself back up again. So in Allegiant we find out how the whole city came about, how Chicago, which what we learn in Allegiant is that the city they're in is actually some distant future Chicago, and it is an experiment that they've set up, and there are other city experiments set up around the US, and when they leave the city, it almost seemed to me that like they just left the outside sort of fields past the fence, and then they were instantly in what was out there. Like, you could instantly see buildings, you could see they obviously went to the bureau, and it just seemed that like you stepped from one world straight into the other. There was no sort of like, I imagine there would be some sort of forest or lots of land to separate the two. I don't know if there actually is, and I just misread that. But that's how my imagination saw it anyway. And we also find out pretty hugely what divergent actually means, and being divergent means that your genes are genetically pure. I think they did some testing on genes, and they took out, when they did the factions, it sort of takes out certain characteristics, certain genes, and we find out that Tobias isn't divergent. He is genetically damaged. He just shows some divergent aspects, if that makes sense. So that was sort of an interesting thing to find out and to actually know what it means to be divergent. So the fact that their city was an experiment really reminded me of the Maze Runner. The fact that there's this whole group of people looking in on the city. There are cameras in there that could see them at any point of the day, wherever they were. It's like you really don't know what's outside their boundaries. And it just reminded me of the Maze Runner in that sense, that they were able to get out and find these people that are controlling what's happening within their city. Felt like the ending was a really nice ending. I mean, obviously no one wanted Tris to die, so that way it wasn't a nice ending, and you wanted to see them be happy and together and finally have their own little house and get on with their life. And I can see now why the ending is so controversial to people, because they never would have imagined that would have happened. But the way that she wrote the end of the book was really lovely. The fact that Tobias was able to mend his relationship with his mother was just a really nice thing to see. And he was able to forgive her for sort of walking out on him and leaving him with his father. And also, right at the end, when he braves his fear of heights and goes on the zip wire, and that is how he spreads her ashes. I thought that I can see myself in the cinema when that scene is happening, just like bawling my eyes out. I can imagine it's just going to be a really touching moment. And I thought that was a really nice way of him to honour her, because it was something that she had always talked about and sort of teased him about, him being afraid of heights and not going on this zip wire. That is pretty much my overall review of the book and what happened in it. I wasn't thrilled by it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I nearly gave it 4 just because of the ending, but to be honest, I felt like you were just constantly waiting for things to happen, and then it happened and it didn't excite me. And actually, just looking at the bottom now, you can see that the bottom of the book is actually the bureau. You can see that it was once an airport. Don't know if you could see that, but never noticed that until now. So like I said, you can see that after Tris dies, because you've still got Tobias's point of view, you can see that Chicago starts to mend itself. Joanna and Evelyn agree for peace, and that Tobias ends up living in an apartment and with his mother for a little bit, and I think it all just rounded out really nicely in the end, despite it being the rest of a crappy book. But yeah. So now I'll go on to 4, and this has, I think, 3 novellas and then some other little short stories at the end. So if you didn't know, Veronica actually was going to tell Divergent, the whole series, from the point of Tobias, and then a couple months into writing she just realised it wasn't working and switched and created Tris's character. So the first 3 is novellas, and this is what she wrote, and it's nice to see for before he met Tris, and what he went through before he even went to Dauntless. Also, leading on from Allegiant, I like how it ends with Tobias, and then for the book 4 is almost a flashback. It's like he's thinking about his time, his life, before he met Tris and then meeting her, and I just thought it was a really nice sort of flashback, and I was really glad that she actually published this book. I gave this book 5 stars because I thought, to be honest, it was a lot better than Allegiant was altogether. Really liked going back to what happened in Divergent, the first book, and just seeing it being told by Tobias's point of view and getting just that more depth to the whole story, and just seeing what goes on from someone else's perspective. And you also see the moment where he's at his choosing ceremony, and obviously his dad wants him to stay in abnegation, but he has to leave just to get away from his father, and that's when he chooses Dauntless. And for me, his choosing ceremony and the time after that really reminded me of Tris's experience, because they both went into the unknown. They picked Dauntless to sort of get away from their existing life, but they didn't know the full extent to what they were getting into. So yeah, it was very sort of similar backgrounds. So yeah, this was a really quick read for me. I only read it in 2 days. Overall, I wasn't thrilled with Allegiant, but I was very pleased that I actually went ahead and read 4 because it left me on a good note with the trilogy. And like I said, it was like a nice flashback back to the beginning of the book, back to my favourite book, which is Divergent. Yeah, so hopefully next week I'm going to be seeing Insurgent at the cinema, which would be really nice. So I will leave my corresponding blog posts to these below. Let me know if you've read Allegiant, what you thought of the book, because for me, I know the ending was very controversial to people, and a lot of people, you either love it or you hate this book, and for me I think it is a little bit of a hate the book as much as I love the ending. So let me know what you think of these books. As always, all my links are down below. Yeah, I highly suggest you check out my blog, because I tend to update that more frequently than on here. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, because sometimes these videos go up a bit later than I'd like them to be. If you want to see what I'm currently reading, check out my Goodreads page, because I update that pretty much every day. So until my next video, I will see you soon. Bye guys.